Welcome back to the show. Today, we're diving deep into what it means to be a modern husband, father, and man. My guest, Brian Page, isn't just a financial education powerhouse. He's also someone who's lived the complexity of building a life alongside a powerhouse partner, raising a family, and navigating all of the unspoken stuff that comes with trying to, quote, do it all in a dual career household. Brian, thanks for coming on the show.
Frederick, I'm really excited to be here, and I love the work that you're doing and the men you're supporting. It's valuable. It's making a difference for a lot of people. And like I said, I'm happy to be here because I follow what you do. And again, I'm thrilled to be able to share our message to the men out there and the couples out there who need support just to manage their money and their home as a team.
Not trying to bury the lead here, but go to modernhusbands.com. That's where you can find Brian, and we'll bring that up again at the end. Brian, I always love to start with this. Was there a moment, personal or professional, that made you realize something had to shift in how we show up as husbands and partners?
My wife is really successful in her career, and we moved from Cincinnati, Ohio to Atlanta for her career. And I had spent my own career doing what's called the greedy work, meaning the work that is necessary to advance, to go the extra mile, that cuts into the amount of time that folks spend at home managing everything that comes with a family. And I recently interviewed Dr. Claudia Golden, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2023, over the gender pay gap. And essentially, what she found was that all things equal, it's really the greedy work that causes it, meaning it is a societal norm after children are born for men to feel the need to be the financial provider. And as a result, women fill the void inside the home. And it's not necessarily strategic in many cases. And it wasn't in ours. It was just like what we did. And we looked at just the short-term math, which might have made sense back then, not now. And as a result of that, we just carried forward. And there was no systems discussion. There wasn't any sort of depth to the conversation about what the home would look like and how it would operate. And it's obviously regrettable. And when we were in a position in Atlanta where we just needed one of us to give, because when you have three kids, you can't have two. It's difficult, I should say, to have two people who are both doing the quote greedy work. And I prefer to look at the system where you have a gardener and a rose in the relationship, meaning the gardener nourishes the home environment. The gardener usually works full time as well. And the rose is who is blossoming in their career, in part from the nourishment being provided at home. And so we just switched roles. And I'm the gardener at home, and the need for one of us to be the default domestic safety net fell this time intentionally to me. And I love it. I build my work schedule now around what the family needs. And it allows for my wife to thrive, and she deserves it. It's her turn. And I think because we both have lived in each other's shoes, both in our career ambitions and managing the home and caregiving, it made the transition easier for us. But that's not to say there weren't any bumps in the road, because ultimately it started with me not knowing. I didn't even know how to do the laundry, to be clear. I worked 70, 80 hours a week. I had a bleeding ulcer. I'm the old school guy from a rural area. And like, I just literally Googled, how do you be a great husband? That's where this started.
One of the things that I come up with and confront in my own life and also with the clients that I work with is this idea that we have to be the financial provider. Was that hard for you as a man who was raised with that certain idea as what providing meant for your family?
Yeah. And there's still times where it's hard. And there's a lot of literature out there that shows why it's hard. And frankly, when you look at the data, it's for good reasons. Both men and women alike believe that for a man to be a good partner, that they must be capable. That's an important word, capable of being a financial provider. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be the breadwinner. It doesn't necessarily mean they must be the breadwinner. It just means they must be capable. So there is that inherent pressure. Whereas when the same question is asked to men and women, and this is according to Pew, only 35% of folks believe that women should be capable of being a financial provider to be a good partner. And you've got the modern world of work where Fortunately, there's progress and women are crushing it in their careers, and the gender pay gap is closing, and it's not closed all the way, but there's been tremendous progress. But what has not been discussed enough is what men were doing 50 years ago to crush it in their careers was in part on the backs of women doing the unpaid labor at home. And you can't expect a system where both partners work, and that's the majority of households, and both partners are ambitious without addressing the unpaid labor at home in a way where it is equitable, but also it's practical. And if you, let's say, strip away gender norms, which, if you look at it from the perspective of just an economist, just looking at person A and person B, it's far easier to look at this situation rationally. And if you look at partner A and partner B and determine that partner B has the opportunity to earn more financially, if partner A does more of the domestic labor at home, and the goal is increase your household income, then the solution is really simple. And that's like, for us, that was one of the reasons also, because I was at a point where I probably wasn't going to earn more, but she had more because of her profession. There was more runway, so to speak. And it was rational, it was logical, but feelings aren't. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And it really takes a guy that just either wasn't raised in a world, maybe it's their own intimate home or the people around them, where money and masculinity were married. Maybe that's part of it. For me, I think like I had accomplished what I really had wanted to accomplish in my career. So I felt, I think, satisfied. So it made it easier. And quite frankly, I don't know if I would have been man enough to do that if I hadn't. And I think it takes a real man to be like, look, I don't need money to define my value as a provider. Particularly when you ask women, like, what's the number one thing you look for? Study after study says the exact same thing, or survey after survey, I should say. And that's social and emotional support. That's number one. In a circumstance where both couples have higher earning capacity, or collectively you can find a way to make enough to live the life you want to make, if both couples can be supportive of that or in the same team, it can work. I'm lucky. My wife continues to reinforce her appreciation for doing the things that she would always used to do. And I think that's part of it. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons that I am comfortable not being the breadwinner, because my wife goes out of her way to show me appreciation, to tell me how much I'm appreciated for it. And men need to hear that. I heard that from Dr. Joshua Coleman, and I were talking about this on our podcast, and men just need that affirmation. I know there are folks out there that, particularly for women that have been doing the domestic labor at home, they're like, why should I have to do something like that? You know what? I don't know how else to explain it, but that's the world that we grew up in, and that's a need that a lot of men have because of that world. And it doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that it's fair. Just like the gender pay gap isn't fair. It just means that if you love your partner and your partner is struggling with it, you really shouldn't look at it as, I shouldn't have to do that. That's not a loving response. A loving response is, how can I make sure my partner loves himself and do the things that I need to do because he's doing the things that are allowing me to shine in my career.
You bring up a couple good points. The appreciation first, we'll start with that because that was the last thing you said. So appreciation works both ways in a sustainable relationship. It's crucial for both partners to be expressing their appreciation. And this isn't a pat on the back for doing the little thing every single day, every single week, all the time, but just once in a while hearing that, hey, I see what you're doing. I'm noticing that you're XYZ, and I appreciate what you do for the family. And that works wonders for intimacy, because what I've come across in the men that I either help or ask me to help, and maybe they don't sign on to some of my work, they want more intimacy. Intimacy starts with some of the other stuff. It's not just what happens in the bedroom. What happens in the other rooms of your house dictates what happens in the bedroom. So if you're a partner who isn't tuned in, who isn't noticing the things that have to get done, who isn't sharing the load, it's hard to get to that intimate point where your partner wants to engage in that in that sort of way. So I would start with some tough conversations, some close conversations, things that you actually appreciate about each other, and those sorts of things.
I got to say the research supports that. I mean, and it's funny that research like that makes the media headlines, but you can, if you just Google sex and chores, you're going to find a copy of the research. And yeah, that's absolutely the case here. I've got two quick things. One is that here's a husband hack for you. Fold the laundry on the bed right before bedtime. It's a great, it's just,
Love that.
yeah. But the other thing is my wife works in the office 3 days a week when she's not traveling. She works in the office 3 days a week, but when she's home twice a week. And if I'm working in the kitchen or living room or whatever, she'll walk in and I don't want to say I'm a neat freak, but I have to have things clean to feel settled. And she'll walk in and just almost every time she'll be like, oh, I love this beautiful kitchen. Little comments like,
Right.
and I think I don't know how much of it is forced. I know it's definitely genuine, but it's also pure appreciation because that's what she had to do for such a long time. And like, now that's being done for her. And I'm unusual where I do almost everything at home. And what I advocate for is teamwork, working as a team in a way that works best for you. But for our circumstances, it's made us far happier. She's far happier. And I'm sure we'll get to the mental load. But frankly, when your partner has a big job, they don't need to be weighed down by the mental load of also managing the home. That's two full-time careers. And I
Right.
think that's been a big step for her is being alleviated of that. Not that the kitchen's clean, that she just doesn't have to worry about anything like that.
Exactly. And everyone wants to know what's in it for me. What's in it for me is a normal human question to have. And you said something there. I did it for her, but you're doing it for her, but you're also doing it for
Yeah.
you. You're doing it for your kids. You're doing it for just because it makes you feel good, but it makes you feel good because you know you're making her feel good. It's like a positive feedback loop that you create just by simply noticing and doing more.
Dr. Coleman's brought that up that when men do things like that, usually the motivation is they want to do it for their wives. And I know one of the things that you hear is, no, you should do it because you're a responsible adult. But again, why crush motivation? Why stand in the way of something like that? A husband is motivated by making their wife happy, by doing the domestic labor. Let's not stop that. Let's celebrate that.
And I just want to stamp that with don't make it transactional, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
if you're
sure.
doing
Right.
something to get something else, and then that something maybe never comes, maybe the appreciation doesn't come as often. Then now you start scorekeeping, and that creates a bad dynamic. So yes, I agree with you. Just make sure that motivation is true,
It's
doing it
genuine. Yeah, yeah.
genuine. Like I
Yeah.
don't expect something in return now. You going back to what you said about the provider conversation that we were having, and your circumstances is obviously unique to you and your wife. And there's other couples. I would say the majority of couples are out there. Both partners are working for their own reasons, and maybe they both love their career paths, and
Yep.
maybe
That's a
like
lot of couples.
right, and maybe there's no clear breadwinner, right? It's like it's not when we talk about breadwinner,
That's a lot
there's
of
not a
couples too.
big gap, right?
Yep.
So that's the other piece that I just don't want to get lost in our conversation because your situation, you're able to work from home, and that's really helpful to be able to do some of the things you do to support. Now, what do you say to couples who have that dynamic where both leave the house,
Yep.
typical 9 to 5 type jobs? How can they both support each other? We're talking equitable household division of labor as best as you can. What are a few of your tips for that?
First, I think that the goal should be a roughly equal leisure time. And I know you're not supposed to score keep, but that's like a good rule of thumb to make it a little bit easier to figure out like what's fair because there's going to be resentment if one partner is doing more. What doing more means at work or at home. But if one partner is on the golf course all the time and the other partner finds themselves always doing work, there will be resentment. I think you should strive for an equal amount of leisure time. The second thing to consider is, and this is not I'm stealing this from the author of How Couples That Work. I had Dr. Pettigrew on my podcast, and this was super insightful. And look, just break life into 5-year chunks. And if you break it into 5-year chunks, when you sit down with your partner, you have to make a decision. If you both are ambitious, you still are going to have with children. Without children, this isn't necessary. But when you have kids, one of you is still going to have to be the domestic safety net, meaning somebody from the school to call when they're sick. like those types of things that are disruptions in the workforce. And her perspective is that every 5 years, look at who is going to be, and this the gardener and the rose, right? Who's the gardener at home nourishing the environment, and then who's the rose blossoming in their career? That gardener could still might only be doing literally half of the domestic labor, including the mental load, et cetera. But they're the domestic safety net. And then after 5 years, you reevaluate, and perhaps it's the other partner's turn. Like my wife and I have taken turns to ensure that there's not resentment. So that would be important to stick to, is just looking at life in 5 year chunks and having defined roles. And then the third is, if you have the means, outsource. I don't know, like years ago, I got a pay raise. I don't remember what it was, a windfall, but essentially, I my knee jerk was, let's not buy new furniture or a new car or any of that kind of crap. That's easy for me. I'm not a materialistic guy, so it's easier for me to say that. But let's get a housekeeper. And oh my God, you should see my wife's face like light up. So we got a housekeeper once a week. Can you get somebody to do your landscaping outside, mow your lawn? You think of the things that maybe you don't enjoy to do, you're not necessarily good at, that are time sucks. Those are really good things to look at to outsource. And people crack on like eating out. Eating out is an outsource. That's what that is. I love to cook, but I'm slammed right now and I haven't cooked in a week. And I usually, when I say I love to cook, I don't stick a frozen pizza in the oven. I cook. I'm just slammed. So we eat out. And frankly, the cost of groceries are so high that it doesn't make the difference. The financial difference isn't meaningful. But what that means is I'm not cleaning the kitchen 3 times a day now because of all the dishes. I'm not spending an hour preparing. I'm not coming up with grocery lists and making a second run to the grocery if I forgot. Those types of things, because those are time sucks. So if you have the means to outsource, do it. And I'm not suggesting that outsourcing is alleviating all responsibility. You still have to have somebody who owns the task of outsourcing, right? Like the person who's communicating with whomever you're outsourcing to. But that communication and that responsibility is like significantly less than it would be if you were doing it yourself. I guess to bring this all home, number one, try to make sure there's a round and equal amount of leisure time. Number two, look at life in 5 year gaps, milestones, and have an idea of whose career is being prioritized at that time. And then after those 5 years, revisit. And then the third, outsource what you can.
You recently became Fair Play certified. For folks who don't know what that is, what does that mean and why does that matter in real life?
So it's a domestic labor system. And for me, it's something that was super foreign 5 years ago. And it ties into my journey. When I Googled, how do you be a great husband? After reading a bunch of nonsense, I stumbled upon the book Equal Partners by Dr. Mangino. And it's just such a great book. And I can't recommend it enough. And so I read that. And that stripped away gender norms, which is important. But there you go. Yeah, Frederick's showing the book now. And that stripped away gender norms, which is important because then you can look at things like an economist. You can look at things like two chess pieces. And then like, how can you organize things based on just human capital? And then the book after that I read was Fair Play. And I love Eve. He's wonderful too. And Eve created a system that makes it far easier for folks to be able to manage the home more like a business. And what I mean by that is this. I think so all too often, many of us like slip into the roles and responsibilities that we have in the home. That was the case in our marriage. And without intentionality, you're going to have frustrations and resentment. And a fair play method, you can be boiled down to the idea that when you just divide the labor, the domestic labor, you do it in a way where there's an understanding and an accepting of your role. And it's not any different than if you worked at a company. So let's say, for example, fair play cards that are used as conversation starters and tasks. So let's say it's like the grocery shopping, like that's one of the tasks. I'm just going to use that as an example. There you go. Yeah, Frederick's showing it now. So you have what's called CPE, conception, planning, execution. The conception is like the idea. For me, grocery shopping's okay. What am I do grocery shopping and cooking. I find it difficult to separate those two tasks. It just leads to meaningless communication and friction between my partner and I. So we couple the two. So what does that mean? That means I have to think about what needs to be purchased at the grocery based on what I'm making this week. And then what I'm making is based on like when people are going to be home, right? When you have children and that do after school activities, a wife that works, sometimes they're in town, sometimes they're out of town. Like all of these things are different responsibilities where you have to be malleable and understanding of what it is that you can actually cook and when it can be ready, what nights you have to eat out, etc. So anyway, you go through that process and you are that's the conception. Like the idea is like, what are you cooking? And then you have your list of things that you go to purchase at the grocery. And then as you are coming up with all these ideas, you have to factor in how long the groceries are going to be good. Because if you're buying vegetables, right, you can't, or fish, and you don't want to freeze the fish, you can't put it in there for 7 days, right? You got to make those things pretty quickly. So that's the idea, the conception. The planning is actually like the planning of going to the grocery store. And this is a hack that I think I just did it myself, but I write my list in order of the grocery store.
Mm.
So my vegetables are first because that's the first thing that I hit when I go into the grocery stores. The breads are next because that's the next thing. Then the meats, and because it makes it easier to cross it off the list, and that way I don't miss anything. And I know that sounds a little OCD, but trust me, it's not. And by the way, for grocery store owners who change things around, I hate you. Don't ever do that again. Nobody likes you who
Oh
does
my
that.
gosh, yeah, that's the
Don't, there's
worst.
no keeping it fresh. It's stupid. It's a frustration. So anyway, so that's the planning. And then the execution is actually going to the grocery store. That's like doing it. The
And
easy
putting the
part.
groceries away and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's all of it.
Now, so back to the CPE, like I own that. My wife doesn't tell me you need to go buy this. You need to do that. What time are you going? You should go this. So I own that. It's my responsibility. That's important because my wife doesn't, men call it nagging. My wife doesn't nag me. I don't have to worry about that. I shoulder that. And something else that would always frustrate me is when she would used to go to the grocery, I'd be in the midst of work and she would walk in. And so what her parents did is what she saw growing up. She'd be like, hey, can you help bring the groceries in? You're not going to say no, but it's like, I'm literally in the middle of work and you're asking me to know what you do it. So I don't let anybody else put the groceries away. I do that, right? Because that's all part of it. And the key is that there's no nagging. And she doesn't have this mental load list in her mind where she is making sure it's done. And I don't have someone chirping in my ear. And then the final thing with fair play to consider is this minimum standard of care. Meaning, yeah, what would a reasonable person say about your grocery shopping habits? Are you only buying like frozen pizzas, right? Or is there some sort of
Yeah.
element of nutrition in here? And you have to agree there. And I think that's where there can be a lot of disputes because people are going to have different levels of minimum standards of care. And that's normal.
The key here is communication, right? Because in order to have a system in place, you have to set it up. And in order to set it up, you have to have some conversations. And I
Yeah.
think we got to start there. It's, hey, how's life working for us? How's our relationship? Are we feeling really good? What's going on? And if you're feeling like you're not so great, it's time to install a system. Because what's James Clear's famous quote, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
That's a
And
great point. Yeah.
my wife and I are guilty of this for the first 7 years of our marriage. We didn't have a system. We were winging it and we were surviving, not thriving, definitely frustrated, definitely a lot of resentment building between both of us. To your point, nagging was a thing for us. I definitely wasn't doing my fair share. I didn't know what fair play was at the time. I didn't know what mental load was, never heard the term. Without a system, we were hurting. And a lot of couples need to start realizing that, hey, if you're committing to a life with someone else and you're going to share a house and a life and raise kids with that person and you want it to work, then why not get some supports? Why not install the system? I think a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed and burnout and you look at the box of 100 cards and you're like, forget it. And we talk ourselves out of it. You can start small and you can start with 3 cards, 5 cards. And when we say cards, it's just tasks. Write down what the 5 biggest grievances right now, laundry, dishes, groceries, dinners, whatever it is. And how can we divide those in a way that works for both of us at this season of our life?
If you could switch places with Warren Buffett, would you?
He's going to die soon. No.
What's more valuable, $150 billion or time?
Time.
That's why systems must be in place. Even if your marriage is going great, you have to put systems in place because who the hell, maybe you do, but I'm not like, oh, I can't wait to do the dishes. No, I want systems in place to get that stuff done as efficiently as I can to spend time with my wife, whether it's walking, playing pickleball, whatever it may be, so we can free up time to do things together that we enjoy. We need systems in our home to create the efficiencies, to create the time needed because you and your wife are busy. My wife and I are busy. I'm sure many of your listeners are busy. And you've got to really strive to create those efficiencies so you can make sure that you're prioritizing time with yourself and your spouse.
I love the way you're talking about this, and this conversation has been just brilliant because you're talking very logically, and I think that's how your brain works. You're just like, let's look at the facts and how can we approach this as a problem to solve together, and what's the logical approach? If one person is a significant breadwinner or has that opportunity more so than the other, let's make
Yeah.
a informed decision. And I think that goes to your background. So talk about a little bit more about your background in the finance world, because that was your, this still is your career, but tell us that journey of like when you were younger to now and how it all weaves together.
My upbringing shaped who I am and how I see money and the story it tells about me. But I'm not atypical. That's the case with all of us. Like most of our relationships with money stem from our childhoods, particularly when we're 8 through 12. And my father, who is I would put him up in a contest for the world's most frugal man. It is extremely impressive. But he grew up, he had financial trauma. And it was my youngest that actually pointed that out. And he grew up in a farm. They were sharecroppers. I don't know anything about farming, but you don't own the farm. You farm the farm, you do all the work, but you get a fraction of the fruits of the labor, so to speak. And so they didn't grow up with much. So to finish college, he had to live in a railroad car and worked on the railroad and then went to school, computer engineer. And fast forward to my upbringing, and we were doing fine. My dad was a computer engineer. He had rental properties. My mom she was disabled. She was a special education teacher, but she had multiple sclerosis and chronic pain from a tornado injury. And so we made enough to live on outwardly what would be the the Joneses lifestyle, to have a really nice car, a nice house, blah blah blah. But we didn't have a nice car. We had, when I say the shittiest cars ever, the first car I remember us having was this station wagon that was the size of a home. It was the old Woody station wagon, like from National Lampoon's Summer Vacation. And someone followed us home. I was in the car. Someone followed us home from the grocery store and wanted to buy it. It wasn't for sale. Didn't say it was for sale. Just somebody wanted to buy it. They recruited it. And they did it because they knew they had a champion. They knew they had a winner. And my parents sold it, and I saw it within the next month or two win the Clinton County Demolition Derby. That's how big of a piece of shit it was. It was recruited to win the Demolition Derby. That wasn't the worst car. The worst car was this blue shit like Malibu station wagon, where it was so bad at one point where the door handles rusted off, and my dad, instead of getting a new car, drilled holes where the door handles were and ran metal fish wire in there and created like a hook. So to open the doors, it was like starting a weed whacker, right? So nothing worked. Like the gas gauge didn't work, but the speedometer didn't work, which sucks driving at night because you have no idea how fast you're going. So anyway, I leave little rural Ohio and go to college and realize, hey, my parents, they could have driven nice cars. What's going on here? So I went back between my first year of college and my freshman and sophomore year in college. I asked my dad, like, why would you do that? And so my dad's like, all right, get out a calculator. All right. So I get out this calculator and asked me what a car payment would be. And I'm thinking, I don't know, $350 a month. Like, all right. Now you need comprehensive insurance because you're making car payments. You don't own it. The lender owns it. What would that be? I don't know, $100 a month. So type that in and type that times 12 months. Now take that times 20 years. And obviously it's this big number. I'm like, all right, what's the point? He says, the point is that no kid of mine is going to have to live in a railroad car like I had to pay for my college. And that's the only way I knew that we could pay for yours. And that was the first time in my life where I realized that money was a tool that you spend to unlock the dreams of your life and to provide in a way for your family what is most important to you. And it wasn't about earning, it was about using. And it was about how money speaks to us and models to us what is most important in our lives. It was education. I became an educator. I was a national teacher of the year. I taught personal finance and economics. It was a labor of love to be able to help kids open their first IRAs and file their first tax returns in class, use credit cards responsibly, and that led to other careers. But ultimately, I'm a teacher at heart, and there's nothing that is a greater joy than to see somebody recognize how, if you use money in the way that matters most to you and your partner or to your family, to see how much happier they are. And so now I'm a accredited financial counselor as well. And I do help couples. I'm not charging right now. Just I'm doing it because I want to help people manage their money as a team.
Love it. On the same page, consulting. Your last name just works perfectly for that.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah, yeah.
And modernhusbands.com. So before we wrap up, I want to do a lightning round here. What is your favorite part? I know you're a pickleball fanatic. What is your
Huge.
favorite part of pickleball that you think actually relates to marriage?
Oh, the partnership, the communication, right? Like when you're playing pickleball, if you have somebody that you just naturally sync with, or in my case, it's somebody that's hopefully better than me, even though I play all the time, it raises your level. When you're
Mhm.
playing with someone who's really great, exceptional, and they're a good communicator, you become better. You become a better version of yourself. And I feel like that done the right way, that's marriage, right? Where
Mhm.
together you make each other better.
Love it. We could do a whole podcast episode on that. What is what is
I'm
one-
always game for talking about pickleball.
what is one system you and your wife use at home that's been a game changer?
It's not a system, it's outsourcing. Yeah, outsourcing is number
Outsourcing
one.
as much as possible.
Yeah, but obviously the system is fair play
Mm.
that's been the game changer. And it's not really the fairness aspect of it. There's no gender stuff with it. It's honestly just like it eliminates micromanaging. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. I don't micromanage the tasks that she's responsible for. She doesn't micromanage mine. And nobody likes to be micromanaged on mundane tasks like the dishes or the laundry. And I can't stress enough how awesome that is, just to own something and not be nagged about it. Or for someone else to own something and for them not to be nagged about it. It's a game changer.
Dishes and laundry are the ones that come up all the time for almost everybody, especially if you have a lot of kids. Laundry is never ending. Even we have two kids, and laundry is never ending for us. And then dishes is an everyday thing, right? You
Three
guys,
times a
how do
day.
you
Yeah.
guys? Just curious how you guys do both of those.
So she has half of her wardrobe's really nice. So anything that's really nice, she has her own separate basket in her closet, and she does that laundry. Probably she doesn't want to tell me this, but she doesn't trust me, and I don't blame her. Like four years ago, I was basically putting in like my work boots with a suit top at the same washing machine. I didn't know what I was doing. She does that, and then I do all the other laundry. So like her active gear, stuff like that. I do my own laundry. And then I sometimes do our kids' laundry, but they do their own. It
Your kids
depends
are a
on their
little older,
schedule.
yeah.
Yeah, my oldest is in 6 AP classes and he's getting his pilot's license. So I can just sense when he's overwhelmed and the laundry's piling up and I just do it. He never asked me, but I think they just probably have seen what my wife and I do and they just do it themselves now. Our kids aren't. Now, but again, if they're really busy, we do it. Or I should say I do it for them. As far as the dishes, I anything that's kitchen related, it's me. We just keep it simple. Whether it's cooking, my wife will tell you this. I'm not throwing her under the bus, man, but she can't cook. It's not her thing, and I can, and I enjoy it. My brother's the same way, and his wife can't cook either. But it's just a lot easier if all things kitchen, in my opinion, all things kitchen is one person, whether it's groceries, food, keeping it clean. And I had somebody on our podcast that said that what they found, they don't have kids. That's an important distinction. But what they found is that essentially, if you throw the money tasks out the window, that they found that it takes about the same amount of time to do all things kitchen as it does everything else in the house. Now they outsource like landscaping and stuff, but I honestly feel the same way because the kitchen is never ending.
Yeah, I think it's a really, and again, we could do a whole podcast episode on this too. We as society, we need to stop thinking about tasks as gendered. And this
Yeah, it's
isn't
so stupid,
this
isn't it?
isn't novel. I'm not the first person to say this. This is not my idea. originally, but in my wisdom as an older married man, I've been married almost 11 years now.
Congrats.
Yeah, yeah, 11 years in August. But it's so dumb to think about laundry as women's work or dishes or anything, mowing the lawn as men's job, right?
Yeah.
It's not the case. It's not real. It's all made up. And when we start to identify tasks as gendered, then that's where we start to get some really strange relationships inside our home with each other, with intimacy and all of it. So it's, hey, let's like strip everything back, ask ourselves, like, where did all these beliefs come from? Let's start there. Why do I believe what I believe? And is it real? Is it what I want to believe? Is it helping my current life that I want to build with my partner? If you
Do you
want
do the
to,
laundry?
I do a lot of the laundry. My wife similarly won't let me touch her laundry, and I have asked
All of it? Or is it just the
all of
nice
it,
stuff? All of
all
it.
of it.
Okay.
And I've tried so many times to convince her to let me do it, and she's still
I got a
resistant with
hack
it.
for you. So
Okay.
when I started doing the laundry, immediately hopes, okay, here's what you got to do. And I took it as, and I asked for it because she's done it for 20 years. If you're on the job, if you're working at Microsoft or whatever, and you're taking over a new role, why wouldn't you have the person who did the role for 20 years tell you how they did it? So I'm like, look, hold on a second here. I'm just going to get out an Excel spreadsheet. So I just have a spreadsheet that's like with the instructions on how to do all the different laundry that is how she wants it done. I just have it taped above the washer. That helps her. So that's how she could at least give up the non really nice clothes. So, second follow up question to that: do you like football?
Love football. I want to caveat the laundry thing. I do. She won't let me fold her laundry. Let's say that. She
Really?
won't let me fold it. I don't know why. Doesn't want to make me fold it and put it away. I'll have to, now that you brought that up for again, it's like, I'll have to, maybe that's the right approach is like, hey, just show me how you want it done.
Write it
Make,
down
makes
and
sense.
then print it out. But
And
hold on. Here's why I asked this question
love
about
football.
football.
Yes.
Here's a hack. During football season, I would do the laundry on Sundays when my kids didn't have stuff. I would do the laundry on Sunday. So then I would just rotate all of the rounds and then fold the laundry while I was watching football.
I love that because that's the thing. Most people don't like to do laundry. So put on some music, put on a show you like, put on
Yeah.
football, whatever it
Put
is.
on
Yeah.
your podcast.
Yeah, put on this podcast. Why not? So, last question for the lightning round, which hasn't been so fast, is a belief about marriage or money that you used to hold, but you don't anymore, and you just totally changed your mind on. You flipped it.
Yeah, that being a provider only means making money.
Hmm. So true. You've probably seen me talking about it. When we think about providing as men, it's super important, especially if you're making shifts like these in your home, to realize that you have so much value and worth in the other things that you provide. And to your point about money, it's a tool that you can use to invest in the things that are going to enrich your life or the lives of the people that you love. And so, why are we only allowing our worth to be defined by one thing when really we can bring attention, love, hard conversation, being open, great communication? There's so much that you actually can and hopefully do provide. And if you don't, you can start. And so realizing your worth is not what you provide financially only. Nothing wrong with making a lot of money, nothing wrong with focusing on that, as long as you also are focused on all the other stuff. If you could leave the men listening with one piece of advice, one first step to start building something better at home, other than visiting your website, modernhusbands.com, which by the way has a ton of resources that are most of them free, what would that piece of advice be?
Schedule a weekly meeting when emotions are low so cognition can be high for you and your partner just to talk through the business of the home, whether it's managing money, whether it's the domestic labor, but it's far easier to work as a team when you have time as a team to work toward common goals.
Collaboration. It's
Hey,
necessary.
where can people learn more about you? I'm going to ask you that question.
So seatatthetablecoaching.com is my website. You can learn about me there. And if you've liked this episode, if you'd like this conversation, if this helped you in any way, please go to the podcast, drop a review. It really helps this type of conversation reach more men. And ultimately, Brian and myself are just trying to help more couples and more men feel empowered in their home, feel like they can show up as a team member in their home without diluting the masculinity piece of things, where I think a lot of men get stuck is they're like, that's not manly, or that's not this, or that's not that. And it's again a story that you're telling yourself, but it's really blocking you from showing up in the ways that your partner really needs you to show up, your kids really need you to show up. And ultimately, that's what I want for you. I want the best for you and your life and the life that you want to build and to dream again. A lot of us have, for whatever reason, life's busy, it beats us down, and certainly the news around the world doesn't help that cycle. So stop beating yourself up, stop beating your dreams away, and actually realize you can build exactly what you want. You just have to be an active participant in that dream. Brian, this was such a rich conversation. I want to thank you for sharing part of your story, some of your tools, your hacks, your time. For all the listeners out there, go to modernhusbands.com. If you are interested in Brian's work on the Same Page Consulting, is that the best place for them to find that as well?
No, it's just everything's at modernhusbands.com.
Modernhusbands.com. There we go. As always, share this with a friend, and thanks for listening.